Welcome, brave souls, to another chilling tale from the Nightmare Maestro. Tonight, we dive into the murky waters of Lake Obsidian, where cutting-edge technology meets ancient terror. What secrets lie beneath the placid surface? What whispers echo in the depths? Settle in, dear viewers, as we follow one man's journey from excitement to horror on what should have been a simple fishing trip. Remember, sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we bring with us. The pre-dawn mist clung to the surface of Lake Obsidian like a funeral shroud, muffling the gentle lapping of waves against weathered docks. Mark Holbrook's fishing boat cut through the fog, the electric motor humming quietly as he navigated toward his favorite spot. His hands trembled slightly, but not from the early morning chill. No, Mark's excitement stemmed from the state-of-the-art depth finder mounted on his console, its crisp display glowing with promise in the dim light. Lake Obsidian had been a part of Mark's life for as long as he could remember. As a child, he'd spent summers here with his grandfather, learning the art of angling and soaking in the old man's tales of monstrous fish lurking in the lake's darkest reaches. Now, at 45, Mark was determined to prove those stories true, or at least catch something worth bragging about at the local bait shop. Mark allowed himself a grin as he killed the motor, letting the boat drift to a stop over what he knew to be a deep underwater shelf. He'd spent months saving for this beauty, the Aquavision X1000. Its advanced sonar could map the lake bed in stunning detail, supposedly even distinguishing between species of fish. Today would be the day he'd finally land one of Lake Obsidian's legendary monster pike. He just knew it. The mist swirled around him, occasionally parting to reveal glimpses of the forested shoreline. Mark breathed deeply, savoring the scent of pine and damp earth. There was something primordial about Lake Obsidian, a sense of agelessness that both calmed and unsettled him. The lake had been here long before humans ever cast a line into its waters, and Mark sometimes wondered if it resented their intrusion. With practiced movements, Mark baited his line with a plump nightcrawler and cast it into the Inkai water. He then turned his attention to the depth finder, powering it on with an almost reverent touch. The screen flickered to life, numbers and graphs materializing as it began to scan. The initial readings were familiar: 120 feet to the lake bed, scattered returns from what were likely smallmouth base. Mark nodded, pleased. But as he watched, a frown creased his brow. The numbers began to flux wildly, jumping from 120 feet to 500, then back to 80, then to an impossible to end. Mark tapped the screen, convinced there must be a malfunction. He'd tested the unit thoroughly before today's trip. It had worked flawlessly. He powered it off and on again, hoping for a reset. The screen blinked back to life. For a moment, the readings stabilized, showing a reasonable 130 feet. Mark exhaled, relieved. But then, before his eyes, the numbers began to climb. 200 feet, 500 feet, 1,000 feet. An icy tendril of fear curled in Mark's stomach. He knew Lake Obsidian was deep, but not this deep. Nothing in North America was this deep. The numbers continued to rise, defying all logic and geology. Suddenly, the graph indicating fish returns exploded with activity. Hundreds, no, thousands of contacts swarmed across the screen. Mark leaned closer, squinting at the display. These weren't individual fish. The returns were too large, too densely packed. It looked almost like a single, massive shape, undulating and shifting. Mark's mind raced, trying to rationalize what he was seeing. Could it be a school of fish so tightly packed they appeared as one entity? Or perhaps some kind of underwater landslide? But even as he grasped for logical explanations, a part of him knew he was witnessing something beyond the realm of normal understanding. A gust of wind cut across the lake, parting the mist for a moment. Mark glanced up, his breath catching in his throat. Where moments ago there had been nothing but fog, he now saw dozens of other boats. They were arrayed in a loose circle, each one identical to his own. Mark blinked hard, convinced he must be seeing things. When he opened his eyes, the phantom boats were gone, swallowed once more by the mist. But a new sound reached his ears, a low, pulsing hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. He looked back at the depth finder. The numbers had stabilized, but at an impossible reading, 9,999 feet. The size of the contact had grown to fill nearly the entire screen. Whatever it was rising, fast. The hum grew louder, reverberating through Mark's bones. He felt a sudden, irrational urge to dive into the lake, to join whatever was awakening in its depths. With a supreme effort of will, he shook off the compulsion, his hands gripping the sides of the boat until his knuckles turned white. As the strange contact continued its ascent, fragments of memory flashed through Mark's mind. Stories his grandfather had told him, local legends he'd dismissed as tall tales. The lake has a mind of its own, boy. It gives, and it takes away. There are things down there older than time itself. Best not to go poking around where you're not wanted. Every few years, someone goes missing on Lake Obsidian. The official story is always drowning or accident, but those of us who know, we understand the truth. Mark had laughed off these warnings, attributing them to an old man's fondness for storytelling. Now, faced with the impossible readings on his depth finder and the eerie presence he felt all around him, he wasn't laughing anymore. The temperature around the boat plummeted suddenly, causing Mark's breath to fog in the air. The surface of the lake began to ripple and churn, as if disturbed by something massive moving just beneath. Mark's fishing rod suddenly bent double, nearly yanking out of its holder. He lunged for it, grasping the handle just as an almighty force pulled from below. The tip of the rod dipped into the water, the line singing with tension. The depth finder's alarm blared to life, a shrill warning that the contact was now less than 100 feet from the surface. Mark struggled with the rod, every muscle straining. This was no fish. This was something else entirely. 50 feet. Mark's arms burned with the effort of holding on. He could feel the immense weight and power of whatever had taken his bait. It was toying with him, he realized with growing horror. Like a cat playing with a mouse before the kill. 20 feet. The water around the boat began to churn and froth. Mark caught glimpses of something vast moving beneath the surface, a shimmering, undulating mass that defied description. 10 feet. A shape darker than the surrounding blackness rose from the depths. Mark's mind recoiled from what he saw, unable to process the impossible geometry of the thing emerging from Lake Obsidian. 5 feet. Mark squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for impact. He could feel hot breath on his face, carrying the stench of ancient, stagnant water and decay. The line went slack. Silence fell over Lake Obsidian. Mark slowly opened his eyes, his chest heaving. The water was calm once more, with no sign of the titanic struggle that had just taken place. He looked down at the depth finder, its screen now blank and lifeless. As the adrenaline began to fade, Mark became aware of a new sound. A rhythmic tapping, like Morse code, emanating from the hull of his boat. He leaned over the side, pressing his ear against the cool metal. Asterisk tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from inside the boat. With trembling hands, Mark pried open the small storage compartment beneath his feet. Water sloshed inside, and floating in it was his old depth finder, the one he'd replaced with the Aquavision. Its cracked screen flickered weakly, displaying an endless stream of numbers and coordinates. Mark snatched up the device, his eyes widening as he deciphered the data. It wasn't just showing depth readings, it was a log. Hundreds of entries, each detailing a fishing trip on Lake Obsidian. Each one ending in terror, in an encounter with something vast and unknowable in the depths. The final entry bore today's date. Realization crashed over Mark like a wave of icy water. He wasn't the first to bring this cursed technology to Lake Obsidian. He was merely the latest in a long line of unwitting sacrifices, lured by the promise of the perfect catch. As he scrolled through the log, Mark recognized names fellow anglers who had gone missing over the years, their disappearances attributed to accidents or misadventure. But the truth was far more sinister. Lake Obsidian had been feeding not on fish, but on the curiosity and ambition of those who sought to plumb its secrets. The mist began to clear, revealing the true face of Lake Obsidian. Where tranquil waters had been moments before, Mark now saw a vast, pulsating membrane. The entire lake was alive, a single gargantuan organism that had been watching, waiting, and learning from every hapless angler who ventured onto its surface. Tendrils of living water began to creep over the sides of his boat, their touch sending jolts of alien consciousness into Mark's mind. In that moment of connection, he understood the truth of Lake Obsidian, a fragment of some cosmic horror that had crashed to Earth eons ago, biding its time and slowly growing in power. Each piece of technology brought to its shores had been assimilated, the lake's intelligence expanding with every sonar ping and depth reading. And now, with Mark's state-of-the-art equipment, it had finally achieved the critical mass needed to fully awaken. As the tendrils enveloped him, Mark had one final, terrible thought. He had never been the fisherman. He had always been the bait. And so, dear viewers, our tale of Lake Obsidian draws to its chilling close. But the echoes of Mark's terrifying discovery continue to ripple outward. What other secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of our world, waiting for the right technology to reveal them? Are we truly the masters of our domain, or merely guests in a realm far older and stranger than we can comprehend? Consider, if you will, the implications of Mark's fate. How many other lakes, rivers, or oceans might harbor similar entities? What if our relentless push to map, measure, and understand every corner of our world is not a triumph of human ingenuity, but a fatal mistake? Perhaps there are places we were never meant to explore, depths we were never meant to plumb. In our quest for knowledge and dominion over nature, have we awakened something that cannot be put back to sleep? I invite you to share your theories in the comments below. What do you think became of Mark Holbrook? What is the true nature of Lake Obsidian? And most importantly, what other horrors might be lurking just beyond the reach of our understanding, waiting for the moment when our curiosity finally outweighs our survival instinct? As you ponder these questions, dear viewers, remember this. The next time you find yourself near a body of water, pay close attention to your surroundings. Does the lake seem a little too still? Does the ocean's rhythm feel a little too purposeful? And when you gaze into those murky depths, ask yourself, is something gazing back? Remember to like and subscribe for more chilling tales from the Nightmare Maestro. Until next time, sleep well. If you can,